All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful and, honestly, moving texts in the entire history of philosophy, Plato's Phaedo. Now, you'll sometimes see it subtitled On the Soul, but I really love The Art of Dying. It hits different, you know? Because this isn't just some dry philosophical argument, it's a real-time deathbed conversation, and it's Socrates' final lesson to the world.
I want you to just picture the scene. It's Athens, 399 BC. Socrates has been condemned to die by his own people. He's in a prison cell, his friends are all around him, and they are completely falling apart. The poison is literally on its way. And yet, the guy telling the story, an eyewitness named Phaedo, says Socrates was the calmest person in the room. This quote here really says it all. The man was happy. He faced his own execution with this incredible serenity.
And this is it. This is the big question that drives the whole dialogue. How? How on earth could anyone face death with that kind of peace? His friends are asking him the same thing. What did Socrates know that they didn't? What belief gave him that kind of strength when facing the ultimate unknown? This isn't just some abstract puzzle. It's one of the most human questions you can possibly ask.
Well, lucky for us, Plato gives us the answer in this amazing dialogue. The Phaedo is Socrates' explanation. He decides to spend his last hours on Earth not feeling sorry for himself, but actually using logic and reason to comfort his friends and lay out the philosophical case for why he isn't afraid. It's his last class, his final lecture on life, death, and what he believes is the immortal soul.
So where does he even start? Well, he kicks things off with a pretty radical idea. He completely redefines what philosophy is even for. For Socrates, it's not about winning debates or sounding smart at parties. Nope, it's something way, way deeper.
So get this. Socrates claims that real philosophers spend their whole lives practicing dying. It sounds morbid, but his logic is simple. What is death? It's just a separation of the soul from the body. And what has a true philosopher been doing their whole life? Trying to separate their mind, their soul, from all the distractions of the body. In a weird way, their entire life has been one long training session for this exact moment.
To really get this, you have to understand how Plato saw the body. It wasn't something to be celebrated. It was a prison, a noisy, needy, distracting prison for the soul. Think about it. Hunger, thirst, pain, desire, fear, all of it comes from the body. Socrates says the body fills our lives with so much nonsense that we never get a chance to actually think clearly about anything important. It's like a permanent obstacle course for your mind.
And this chart here lays out the contrast perfectly. On one side, you have the soul. It's invisible, divine, immortal, and its whole job is to seek truth. Then you've got the body. It's visible, it's mortal, its senses are totally flawed, and it's basically just one big distraction machine. So, the philosopher's job? To care for the soul by paying as little attention to the body as possible.
But look, telling your friends, hey, don't worry, my soul is immortal, isn't going to cut it. These guys are thinkers. They need proof. So Socrates, being Socrates, decides to lay out a few logical arguments to convince them that the soul really does live on after the body dies. His first shot is the argument from opposites. He points out a pattern you see everywhere in nature. Big things come from small things, being awake comes from being asleep, hot comes from cold, everything comes from its opposite. So he reasons, if that's a rule of the universe and the opposite of life is death, then life must come from death. It suggests this endless cycle where souls have to exist somewhere after they die so they can be born again.
But that was just the warm-up act. Now he moves on to what is maybe the most famous and mind-bending argument in the whole dialogue. It's called the Theory of Recollection, and it all starts with a simple observation about how our own minds work.
Think about it for a second. Have you ever in your entire life seen two sticks or two rocks that were perfectly equal? Not just kind of similar, but 100% mathematically perfectly equal. Socrates says, no way, you haven't. Everything you see with your eyes is a little bit off, a little imperfect. Okay, here's the brilliant twist. If you've never actually seen perfect equality, how do you even have the idea of it in your head? How can you look at two sticks and think, yeah, they're close, but not perfectly equal? What are you comparing them to? You must have a blueprint, a perfect idea of equality itself already in your mind.
And boom, that's the conclusion. Socrates says if you didn't get this idea of perfect equality from your experiences in this life, then you must have known it before you were born. Your soul must have existed somewhere else, a spiritual realm, where it saw these perfect concepts, what Plato calls the forms,
like perfect equality, perfect beauty, perfect justice.
There's a fantastic Greek word for this whole idea, anamnesis. It means recollection. So for Plato, learning isn't about cramming new information into your brain. It's actually a process of remembering the pure knowledge that your soul already knew, but forgot when it was born into the messy, confusing physical world. It's a pretty beautiful way to think about knowledge.
But this isn't a one-sided lecture. It's a real conversation, and Socrates' friends are incredibly smart. Just when they're starting to feel a bit better, they hit him with two really powerful objections that threaten to bring his whole argument crashing down. First up, Simmias comes in with his amazing analogy. He says, Socrates, what if the soul is like the harmony of a musical instrument, like a lyre? The music is invisible, it's beautiful, it seems way more special than the wood and the strings. But, and this is the killer point, if you smash the lyre, the harmony is gone, instantly. It can't exist without the instrument. So what if the soul is just the harmony of the body, and when the body dies, the soul just vanishes? Then Cebes jumps in with an even sneakier point. He says, okay, I'll give you that the soul is tougher than the body. It's like a weaver who makes and wears out many, many coats. The weaver outlives any one coat, for sure. But does the weaver live forever? No. Eventually the weaver dies too. So Cebes asks, what if the soul is like that? It might outlive a few bodies, but maybe it isn't truly immortal. What if this just happens to be its last body, its final coat?
At this point, you can feel the mood in the room just plummet. His friends are devastated, but Socrates' response is one of the most important moments of the whole dialogue. He warns them not to become misologists, haters of reason, just because an argument is hard or seems to fail. You wouldn't hate all people because one person let you down, right? He says we have to have courage and keep thinking, and so he does. He brilliantly refutes both points, arguing the soul is in charge of the body unlike a harmony, and that the soul, by its very nature, is the essence of life, and so it can never admit its opposite, death.
After Socrates deals with their doubts, the dialogue draws to a close, but its impact has been just massive. It's way bigger than just what happened in that prison cell. The ideas in this one conversation have echoed through philosophy for over 2,000 years.
I mean, just look at this list of its influence. The Phaedo is ground zero for soul-body dualism, the idea that your mind and your body are two fundamentally different things. It's one of our main sources for Plato's super-famous Theory of Forms. Its arguments were picked up and used by early Christian theologians to think about the immortal soul. And it gave us this powerful new purpose for philosophy. It's not a game, it's the care of the soul.
So in the end, you realize that even though the whole conversation is about death, its real lesson is about how to live. If you believe that your soul is your true self and that it's immortal, then this life isn't the main event. It's just a preparation. It's your one chance to get your soul in shape, to free it from distractions and point it toward what's true and good, so it's ready for whatever comes next.
And that leaves us with a question that travels right from that Athenian prison cell to you right here, right now. And you don't even have to believe in an immortal soul for this question to hit home. What are you prioritizing? The temporary, fleeting desires of the body, or the lasting pursuit of wisdom, truth, and goodness? To put it in Socrates' terms, how are you living in a way that truly cares for your soul?